The twin suns of Kepler 442c beat down mercilessly on the cracked earth below. Nari pressed her 4 delicate arms against the burning ground as she crawled behind a massive water storage tank, her crystalline blue skin, normally shimmering like precious gems, had dulled to a sickly grey from dehydration. The corporate water station hummed with machinery, its silver pipes carrying liquid life that her family couldn't afford. 3 days had passed since her youngest brother collapsed. Little Chemo lay motionless in their shelter, his breathing shallow and weak. Her sister Yuna tried to comfort him, but even she struggled to speak through cracked lips. Their parents had died in the mining accident last season, leaving Nari responsible for keeping her siblings alive. The government ration cards provided barely enough water for 1 person, let alone 3 growing children. She watched the security patrol walk past her hiding spot. 2 mechanical guards, their red optical sensors sweeping back and forth like deadly lighthouses. Nari knew their patterns by heart after watching for weeks. Every 20 minutes, they completed their circuit around the facility. That gave her exactly 4 minutes to reach the emergency valve, fill her container and escape. The credits in her pocket amounted to less than a single day's water allocation. Corporate prices had tripled this month after the desert storms damaged several collection facilities. Rich families in the climate-controlled towers never felt the shortage, but families like hers faced impossible choices: buy water or buy food. Never both. Nari pulled out her small metal container, barely large enough to hold 2 liters. It wasn't much, but it might keep Chemo alive another day. Maybe long enough for the next rainfall, though the weather satellites predicted nothing but endless heat for weeks ahead. The guards disappeared around the far corner of the facility, now or never. She sprinted across the open ground, her bare feet silent on the heated metal walkways. The emergency valve stood exactly where she remembered, painted bright yellow and marked with warning symbols in 12 different languages. Her hands trembled as she attached her container to the outlet pipe. Cool water flowed into her vessel, each drop more precious than diamonds. She wanted to drink some herself, to ease the burning in her throat, but Chemo needed it more. The container filled slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. 50% full, 60, 70. The sound of mechanical footsteps echoed from somewhere nearby. Her heart pounded as she glanced around the corner. The guards had changed their patrol route. 80% full, almost enough. Red warning lights suddenly blazed to life around the facility. Sirens wailed across the complex as automated systems detected the unauthorized access. Plasma nets deployed from hidden launchers, crackling energy barriers that could paralyze any living creature they touched. Nari yanked her container free and ran. The liquid sloshed inside as she dodged between machinery and storage tanks. Behind her, the mechanical guards gave chase, their heavy footsteps shaking the metal platforms. A plasma net shot past her head, missing by inches. The energy barrier struck a nearby wall and dissipated in sparks of blue light. She leaped over a low pipe, her forearms helping her maintain balance as she landed hard on the other side. Another net caught her left ankle. Electricity coursed through her body like liquid fire, and she collapsed onto the burning metal deck. The container skittered away from her hands, precious water spilling across the ground and evaporating instantly in the heat. The mechanical guards surrounded her, their optical sensors glowing brighter as they confirmed the capture. One unit lifted her roughly to her feet, while the other collected the nearly empty container as evidence. They dragged her through the facility toward the justice platform, a raised stage where corporate law was enforced publicly. Other aliens gathered to watch, their faces showing mixtures of pity and fear. Everyone knew the punishment for water theft. Everyone understood why she had tried anyway. Enforcer Krax waited on the platform, his mechanical body a fusion of alien biology and industrial machinery. His original species had been lost to cybernetic enhancement long ago, leaving only a consciousness housed in metal and circuits. He served the corporate authority without question or mercy. The crowd grew larger as news of the capture spread. Parents held their children close, using Nari's fate as a lesson about the consequences of desperation. Shop owners closed their stalls to witness the enforcement of law. Even the wealthy aliens from the towers came to watch from their air-conditioned viewing boxes. Krax's voice resonated through built-in speakers as he read the charges. Water theft, unauthorized access to corporate resources, endangering facility, security. Each crime carried its own punishment, but water theft superseded all others. The plasma saw emerged from his arm compartment, its energy blade humming with deadly power. The tool was designed for both cutting and cauterizing, ensuring that criminals would survive their punishment and serve as permanent reminders of corporate justice. Nari thought of Chemo lying sick in their shelter. Would Yuna find another way? To get water? Would her sacrifice at least teach her sister to avoid such desperate measures? The blade moved closer to her upper right arm as she closed her eyes and prepared for pain that would last the rest of her shortened life. The plasma saw's energy blade cast an eerie blue glow across the justice platform. Nari could feel the heat radiating from the weapon even before it touched her skin. The crowd had grown to nearly 200 aliens, all watching in tense silence as Enforcer Krax prepared to carry out the sentence. Nari's breathing came in short, sharp bursts. Her forearms were bound behind her back with metal restraints that dug into her wrists. The container she had tried to fill with water sat on a nearby table as evidence, its few remaining drops already evaporated under the harsh twin suns overhead. She forced herself to think of home. In their tiny shelter made from salvaged metal sheets, Yuna would be trying to keep Chemo comfortable. Her sister was only 14, but had grown up fast after their parents died. Maybe too fast. Nari worried that Yuna would attempt something equally desperate after learning about today's punishment. The plasma saw moved closer. Its energy field made the air shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Krax's mechanical voice echoed across the platform as he announced the specific violation and its consequence. Water theft from corporate facilities carries mandatory physical marking. The offending limb will be removed to prevent future violations and serve as visible deterrent to others. In the crowd, a young mother covered her child's eyes. An elderly alien male shook his head sadly, but said nothing. Several teenagers whispered among themselves, their faces pale with shock. Everyone understood the harsh reality of their world's justice system, but seeing it carried out never became easier to watch. Nari searched the faces around her, hoping to see someone who might speak up, anyone who might question whether cutting off a young girl's arm was really necessary for trying to save her dying brother. But corporate law was absolute on worlds like this one. The mining companies and water corporations had purchased the right to govern through the Galactic Trade Commission decades ago. A small alien child in the front row started crying. His mother quickly picked him up and pushed through the crowd toward the exit, unable to watch what was about to happen. Several other families followed, though most remained out of morbid curiosity or fear that leaving might somehow mark them as sympathizers. Krax positioned the plasma saw directly above Nari's right shoulder. The blade would cut clean through bone and muscle in less than 2 seconds. Medical nanobots would immediately seal the wound to prevent death from blood loss, but the pain would be overwhelming. Recovery would take months, assuming she could afford the expensive healing treatments. Any final words? Krax asked, though his tone suggested this was merely a formality. Nari lifted her head and looked directly at the crowd. Her voice was weak from dehydration, but clear enough for everyone to hear. I would do it again. For family, anyone would do it again. Murmurs rippled through the gathered aliens. Some nodded in understanding, while others looked uncomfortable. Parents squeezed their children's hands tighter, knowing they might face similar impossible choices someday. An older alien woman near the back of the crowd began to weep quietly. She remembered making similar desperate decisions during the last drought, though she had been lucky enough to avoid capture. Her guilt at escaping punishment, while this young girl faced amputation, was written clearly across her weathered features. Krax raised the plasma saw higher, preparing for the downward stroke that would sever Nari's arm. The energy blade hummed, louder as more power flowed through its systems. In the crowd, several aliens turned away, unable to watch the moment of impact. Nari closed her eyes and tried to picture better times. Summer evenings when their parents were still alive, and water rations were more generous. Chemo laughing as he played with toy ships made from scrap metal. Yuna teaching her the old songs their mother used to sing. The blade began its descent. Time seemed to slow as the weapon moved toward her shoulder. Nari could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, nearly drowning out the plasma saw's mechanical whine. She thought about the water that had spilled when the guards captured her. Precious liquid that could have saved her brother's life. Now nothing but stains on hot metal. Someone in the crowd gasped, but Nari kept her eyes closed. She didn't want her last sight to be the energy blade that would mark her forever as a criminal. Better to remember Chemo's smile or Yuna's gentle hands braiding her hair. The plasma saw was inches from her arm when everything suddenly changed. "Stop!" The single word cut through the mechanical humming like a shockwave. Nari's eyes snapped open to see the crowd turning towards someone pushing through from the back. Krax's optical sensors flickered as he processed this unexpected interruption. The foe voice had been different somehow. Not the usual multi-toned alien speech patterns, but something else entirely. Something that made even the mechanical enforcer pause in his execution of corporate justice. Everyone on the platform froze, waiting to see who had dared to challenge the system that controlled their world. The crowd parted like water as a figure pushed through toward the justice platform. Tejo moved with quiet confidence, his human features standing out dramatically among the gathered aliens. His dark hair was damp with sweat from the desert heat, and his work clothes bore the dust and oil stains of someone who spent long hours maintaining terraforming equipment. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Humans were rare this, far from Earth space, and most aliens had only heard stories about them. Some said humans were unusually emotional creatures who made decisions based on feelings rather than logic. Others claimed they possessed strange moral codes that often conflicted with practical galactic law. Tejo stepped onto the platform without permission, his boots echoing against the metal surface. Enforcer Krax's optical sensors immediately focused on this unexpected visitor, scanning his biological readings and cross-referencing his identity through corporate databases. Human designation, Tai-Ho Kim. Employment status, independent contractor, terraforming engineer, no criminal. Record. Krax's mechanical voice announced the scan results to the crowd. Nari stared at the human in confusion. She had never seen one of his species before, though she had heard the stories. Humans supposedly came from a world where water fell freely from the sky, where no one ever died of thirst, where basic survival resources were considered fundamental. Rights rather than corporate commodities. Tejo looked directly at the plasma saw still humming inches from Nari's shoulder. His expression remained calm, but something in his eyes suggested barely controlled anger. He spoke in clear, measured tones that carried easily across the silent crowd. "I invoke the right of substitution under Galactic Commerce Code, Section 247B. The words hit Krax like a system shock. His mechanical body actually took a step backward as his processors began frantically searching legal databases. The right of substitution was an ancient law, written centuries ago when the galaxy was still governed by honor-based societies rather than corporate efficiency. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Most had never heard of such a law, but the older aliens began whispering explanations to their neighbors. Long ago, before corporations bought most planetary governments, citizens could voluntarily accept another person's punishment if they believed the sentence was unjust. That law has not been invoked in over 300 standard years, Krax stated, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty that surprised even him. But it remains valid under current galactic trade agreements. Tejo replied, "I've reviewed the legal codes. Any citizen can transfer criminal punishment to themselves, provided they accept full responsibility for the consequences." An elderly alien woman near the front of the crowd gasped audibly. She remembered her grandmother telling stories about the old days, when justice was based on community judgment rather than corporate profit margins. The right of substitution had been designed to protect the innocent and allow the community to correct obviously unfair sentences. Krax's processors worked overtime, checking and rechecking the legal databases. The law was indeed still valid, buried deep in the foundational documents that governed galactic commerce. Corporations had never bothered to remove it because no one had invoked it in living memory. You understand the implications of this request? Krax asked. You would lose your arm for a crime committed by another individual. Tejo rolled up his sleeve, exposing his right arm. The human skin looked pale and soft compared to the crystalline hardness of alien biology, but he held it steady without trembling. I understand completely. Transfer her punishment to me. The crowd fell completely silent. Even the mechanical humming of the facility's machinery seemed muted by the weight of the moment. Parents held their children closer while trying to process what they were witnessing. A stranger, a human who owed nothing to anyone on this world, was offering to sacrifice his own body for a young alien girl he had never met. Nari found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. Why? You don't even know me. Tejo turned to look at her, and his expression softened slightly. I know enough. You're a kid trying to save your family. Where I come from, we don't cut off children's arms for wanting clean water. Several aliens in the crowd began crying openly. The simple humanity of his words contrasted sharply with the mechanical coldness of corporate justice. Some had never considered that other worlds might handle such situations differently. Krax found himself in an unprecedented situation. His programming was designed to carry out corporate law efficiently, but the right of substitution created complications his creators had never anticipated. If he proceeded with the punishment against a human citizen, especially one with documented galactic connections, the political ramifications could be severe. Humans had significant influence in several major trade alliances. Their homeworld Earth maintained diplomatic relationships with dozens of species. Harming a human citizen, particularly one acting within legal rights, could trigger trade sanctions or worse. This action would have diplomatic consequences, Krax stated, though he seemed to be speaking more to himself than to anyone present. Tejo positioned his arm directly under the plasma saw, and then maybe it's time to reconsider whether cutting off arms for water theft makes sense in the first place. The Enforcer's optical sensors flickered rapidly as competing priorities clashed within his programming. Tejo kept his arm steady beneath the plasma saw as he began to speak. His voice carried clearly across the silent crowd, reaching even the wealthy aliens watching from their climate-controlled viewing boxes high above the platform. On my world, water falls from the sky every few days. Rivers flow constantly, carrying more fresh water than entire planets could use. Children play in fountains built just for fun. Nobody owns the rain. The crowd stirred uneasily. Many had heard rumors about Earth's abundance, but hearing it described so simply made their own suffering feel even more cruel. An alien mother clutched her dehydrated child closer, tears streaming down her face, as she imagined a world where her baby could drink freely. Tejo continued, his eyes moving across the gathered faces. We have lakes so large, you can't see the other side. Oceans that stretch beyond the horizon. Every home has water flowing from pipes whenever you want it. Hot water, cold water, as much as you need. A young alien male in the crowd shouted out, Then why are you here? Why leave paradise? Because I thought I could help other worlds become better. I came here to work on terraforming projects, to maybe help create more water sources. Tejo's expression darkened. Instead, I found children dying while corporations hoard water that should belong to everyone. Krax's optical sensors continued flickering as he processed this information. His databases contained extensive files on Earth's water abundance, but corporate protocols had classified such information as potentially destabilizing to workforce morale. I've been documenting what I've seen here for the past 6 months, Tejo said, pulling a small recording device from his pocket. Video footage of families rationing drops of water, children collapsing from dehydration while storage tanks sit full behind corporate walls. Deaths that could be prevented with resources that exist in abundance. The crowd began murmuring more loudly. Several aliens pulled out their own communication devices, already beginning to record Tejo's words. The wealthy viewers in their boxes above looked increasingly uncomfortable as they realized their viewing party was being turned into evidence of their own indifference. This recording device connects directly to the Galactic Information Network, Tejo explained, holding it higher so everyone could see. Everything happening here today is being broadcast live to monitoring stations across 12 star systems. Human diplomatic offices, alien rights organizations, trade commission oversight boards. Krax's mechanical body actually took another step backward. Corporate authorities typically handled justice proceedings in relative privacy, with only local coverage that could be controlled or suppressed. The idea of galactic-wide broadcast created complications his programming had never been designed to handle. An elderly alien in the crowd called out, "What will happen when other worlds see this?" Tejo smiled grimly. "They'll see a young girl, about to lose her arm for trying to save her brother's life. They'll see a system where water is treated like jewelry, while children die of thirst. They'll see exactly what corporate rule looks like when nobody's watching." The recording device, in his hand, pulsed with a soft blue light, indicating active transmission to multiple networks. Somewhere across the galaxy, beings on dozens of worlds were witnessing this moment in real time. News organizations would pick up the feed within hours. Diplomatic offices would demand explanations. "I've also sent copies of my documentation to human news networks," Tejo added. "Earth has over 12 billion citizens who've never seen anyone die from lack of water. When they understand what's happening on worlds like this one, they tend to get upset. Very upset." Several corporate security guards had appeared at the edges of the platform, clearly receiving orders through their communication implants. But they hesitated to act, unsure how to handle a situation that was already being broadcast beyond their control. Tejo looked directly into one of the recording devices being held by an alien in the crowd. "To anyone watching this across the galaxy, this is what happens when basic survival becomes a business. This is what corporate justice looks like. Remember this girl's face when you vote on trade agreements." Nari stared at the human in amazement. He was turning her punishment into something much larger, using his own sacrifice to expose the system that had created her desperation. She had never imagined that her small act of theft could become a symbol for something so much bigger. "The trade commissions won't like this exposure," someone in the crowd observed nervously. "Good," Tejo replied firmly. "Maybe it's time they answered some uncomfortable questions. Maybe it's time the galaxy saw how profitable it can be to let children die of thirst." The plasmasaur continued humming above his extended arm, but Krax seemed frozen by indecision. His programming demanded completion of the legal sentence, but the political ramifications of proceeding grew more severe with each passing moment. "Cut off my arm if you want," Tejo said directly to the enforcer, "but know that every being watching across the galaxy will see exactly what kind of justice you represent. They'll see what happens to someone who tried to save a child's life." The broadcast signal pulsed brighter, carrying his words to worlds beyond counting. The moment had become something neither corporate law nor mechanical programming had anticipated. The plasmasaur's humming grew quieter as Krax's mechanical processors worked through countless calculations. Political risk assessments flashed across his optical displays, trade agreement violations, diplomatic incident probabilities, corporate liability projections. Every analysis pointed to the same conclusion: proceeding with the punishment would create far more problems than it would solve. The blue light on Tejo's recording device pulsed steadily, indicating that thousands of viewers across the galaxy were now watching the live feed. Comments and reactions streamed in from dozens of worlds, most expressing shock and outrage at what they were witnessing. "Enforcement protocol suspended," Krax announced suddenly, his mechanical arm retracting the plasmasaur. "Subjects are released, pending further review by corporate legal departments." The crowd erupted in surprised cheers. Several aliens rushed forward to help Nari to her feet, while others surrounded Tejo with questions and gratitude. The restraints fell away from Nari's wrists as she stumbled toward the human who had saved her arm and possibly her life. "I don't understand," she whispered, looking up at Tejo with wide eyes. "Why would you risk everything for someone you never met?" Before Tejo could answer, his communication device began buzzing with incoming messages. News organizations from across the galaxy were requesting interviews. Human diplomatic offices wanted immediate status reports. Trade Commission officials demanded explanations for the broadcast that was already spreading through social networks at light speed. Within hours, the recording of Tejo's intervention had been viewed over 50 million times. The image of a human offering his own arm to save an alien child became a powerful symbol that transcended species boundaries. Comments poured in from beings across the galaxy, many sharing their own stories of resource inequality and corporate oppression. The revolution began quietly, with small protests on mining worlds and agricultural colonies. Workers who had accepted water rationing as normal suddenly questioned why basic survival should depend on corporate profits. Families who had watched their children suffer began demanding answers from their planetary governments. On the industrial world of Kepler 186f, dock workers refused to load water shipments destined for wealthy residential districts, while refugee camps went without supplies. The strike lasted 3 days before corporate authorities agreed to expand distribution to underserved areas. Similar protests erupted on 17 different worlds within the first week. The phrase, "humans share what sustains life," became a rallying cry for resource equality movements. Beings who had never heard of Earth began adopting human concepts about universal access to basic necessities. Nari's family received aid from unexpected sources. Anonymous donors inspired by Tai-Ho's story sent water purification tablets, food supplies, and even enough credits to secure proper medical treatment for chemo. Her brother recovered within days, his strength returning, as clean water flowed freely for the first time in months. Yuna couldn't stop crying when she learned what had happened. "A stranger saved our family," she kept repeating, unable to process the kindness they had received from someone who owed them nothing. The Galactic Trade Commission found itself facing unprecedented pressure to investigate resource allocation practices on corporate-controlled worlds. Human representatives led the charge, backed by surprising support from species that had previously remained neutral on such issues. "The human intervention has created significant political complications," reported one trade commissioner during an emergency session. "Public opinion is shifting rapidly against current resource management policies." Tai-Ho continued his documentation work, but now with official backing from multiple galactic organizations. His reports on water inequality gained widespread attention, forcing corporate authorities to defend practices they had previously implemented without public scrutiny. 3 weeks after the incident, a reporter from the Galactic News Network tracked down Tai-Ho at his temporary housing unit. The interview was broadcast across 47 star systems, reaching an estimated audience of over 2 billion beings. "The question everyone wants answered," the reporter began, "is why you risked your own safety for an alien child you had never met. What drove you to make such a sacrifice?" Tai-Ho looked directly into the camera, his expression serious but warm. "Where I come from, we have a saying. Water is life, not human life, not alien life, just life. When you see a child dying of thirst while someone else hoards water, you don't calculate the political risks. You don't worry about species differences. You just act." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Humans aren't special because we're brave or noble. We're just lucky enough to come from a world where we learned early that sharing basic resources makes everyone stronger. When you've never seen a child die for lack of water, watching it happen feels impossible to accept." The reporter pressed further, "But surely you understood the personal risks?" "Of course," Tai-Ho replied with a slight smile, "but sometimes the risk of staying silent is much greater than the risk of speaking up. If we don't protect each other's children, regardless of what species they belong to, then what kind of galaxy are we building?" The interview's most powerful moment came when the reporter asked about his famous final words during the incident. "You said humans share what sustains life. Can you explain what that means?" Tai-Ho looked thoughtful for a moment. "It means that, on a world with billions of people, we figured out long ago that hoarding water doesn't make you safer. It just makes everyone else more desperate. Real security comes from making sure everyone has enough to survive and thrive." The interview concluded with footage of Nari and her siblings, now healthy and attending school for the first time in years, their future secured by the revolution that had begun with one human's refusal to watch injustice unfold in silence.